Hey, this is Gina Grad.
Hi, this is Teresa Strasser.
Hi, everyone. This is Mike Errico.
Hey there. This is Casey Cavalier.
I'm Rocky Rose.
And you are listening to The Jay Franzi Show.
Lucky you.
Welcome to The Jay Franzi Show. A behind-the-curtain look at the entertainment industry with insights you can't pay for and stories you've never heard. Now, here's your host, Jay Franzi.
Well, hello, and welcome to the show. I am Jay Franzi, and this is your backstage pass to the entertainment industry. This week, we get to talk with a songwriter. We get to talk with Bruce Tarletsky. We'll talk to him about the inspiration behind forming the High Mountain Breezes, a Nashville supergroup, the team that makes up this group, and we'll discuss his producer, Bob Bullock. Now, Bruce, he is just an all-around great guy, and I can't wait to talk with him tonight. So if you would like to join in, comment, or fire off any questions, please head over to jfranzi.com. Now, let's get started. Bruce, sir, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Jay. How are you, sir?
I am fantastic. Why don't we jump in? Let's just go ahead and talk about it a little bit. You've decided to form what we call a supergroup. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You bet. You know, we refer to ourselves as the High Mountain Breezes, and when you want to start something, I started wanting to be a songwriter very late in my life. We've been doing this now for about 15 years. And I kind of knew when I started that the chances of becoming a famous songwriter with commercial hits and things like that were too slim and none. But I enjoyed the process. And, as we started it, like I said, 15 years ago, the typical session path you would go down, and we did a lot of demos, and the players were always the same. And the reason they were always the same was because whenever they came into the studio, the electricity was amazing. And being a novice and not being familiar with Nashville, I thought the players would see each other and play together all the time. And they don't. And every time we got together, the magic was there. We created it. We kept developing friendships over the years and just kept doing it. And I used to have people tell me, there are a lot of great session players in Nashville. You ought to think about working with more. No, I'm good. I'm really good with this. And this went on till about 2015. And I met this guy by the name of Bob Bullock through a good friend of mine, Chris Lusinger. Chris was on all our sessions. And Chris called me one day when I was coming to Nashville. And he said, hey, why don't you come on down to 3rd and Lindsay? I got an extra ticket and, come on down. So the plane landed, went to my hotel, dropped my stuff off, went down there, met Chris, and he sat down. We sat down. I said, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Bob Bullock. Hey, Bob, nice to meet you. Well, this guy's playing up on stage. This guy is really good, and I'm trying to be impressive to Bob and stuff. And I lean over to Bob and say, hey, I think this guy's got a great shot. I really think this guy's going to make it. And Bob looked over at Chris and he said, where'd you find this guy? Because it turned out the guy was John Oates from Hall & Oates. And we've been best friends ever since. But seriously, around 2015, got to the point where I said, you know what? I'm really getting tired of writing demos and being told not no, but heck no. And we were sitting around and we were talking, and if you're from Franklin, that Starbucks out there on Cool Springs Boulevard.
Oh, yeah, yep.
We were sitting out there having coffee one day, and I told Chris and Bob, I leaned over and said, I used to always come here for my music. And they said, well, why do you come now? And I said, seriously, I said, to be with my friends. And that's when they said, welcome to Nashville.
That's awesome. What did you learn during that time?
I learned so much about not just the do's and don'ts, but what it takes. Don't let your expectations be high, and don't come without a job, so to speak. But what I learned during the path by paying attention to the signs as I was going through all of this over the years is my role was different, and I was learning more, and I was appreciating and valuing more by bringing people together, bringing these players together on a regular basis where they were able to bond with each other. And I think that's when I realized, this is why I'm here. So in 2015, we decided that we would shift gears a little bit I had a publishing company, so we started the High Mountain Breezes as a place where session players and tour players and these main folks that I've been working with for so long could come together and make their own music. When they walk into the studio, they're usually walking in to do something for their bosses, whether it's a major recording artist or they're doing it for a songwriter demo, and then they get up, they move, they go to the next session. When they come into the studio for what we're doing, they're really being called on to be themselves. And they come in and they play for themselves. And we want a place, and the High Mountain Breezes is a place where they can leave their music, kind of leave their own legacy, so to speak, or who they are, not necessarily who they work for. We have a thing on our website called Why Do We Love Music? And in there we talk about the fact that everybody probably knows all their music. They've heard it, but they don't know who they are. And we're trying to change that. And that's kind of how this has progressed. And over the years, it really has kind of morphed itself into something unique and different. We're not a band. We're really not. We're just a collection. When we first started, we called ourselves the High Mountain Breezes and the HMB Players. But we learned very quickly that that's kind of like trying to herd cats when you've got all these superstar talented players doing their thing all over the place. So what we did is we kind of shifted a little bit. We said contributing artists and contributing players and contributing songwriters. So we kind of take that route. In fact, we're working on our new album right now that'll be coming out in the fall, and it's titled Contributions. That's what it's all about. We have, I think there's about 24 folks involved with us, and it grows all the time.
Well, speaking of that, let's do a little bit of the rundown. I know you met Bob through Chris, and we'll get back to Bob in a minute here. But Chris, session player, also goes out on the road with Garth Brooks.
Right.
After meeting Chris, what was the next piece of the puzzle?
Well, the piece of the puzzle actually grew before that. In the early years when we first started, Chris Lusinger was part of it. He's been there from day one. Duncan Mullins, he was one of the best bass players around. Duncan cut his teeth with Jerry Reed and Crystal Gale. And, we tease Duncan because if you Google Duncan Mullins, you will see a video clip. And we actually have it, I think, on our website or our Instagram page of him doing a duet with Crystal. It was a duet that she did with Eddie Rabbitt, but Eddie couldn't perform at that time. So we tease him about that. But Duncan Mullins was there. Michael Spriggs, who was another amazing player. At that time, our first drummer was Tommy Harden.
Awesome guy.
Bruce Boughton was on there. So you can see, we just had these folks that were just amazing. Carrie Marks. That was the initial group. And then as we grew, then we get into where we are as the High Mountain Breezes. That's where we currently have the players all include Chris and Duncan and Mark Beckett, who is an amazing drummer. Mark has some great stories to tell when he was growing up because of his dad, Barry Beckett, down at Muscle Shoals. So great stories. Michael Spriggs is still with us. We have Catherine Marks. We have Jimmy Mattingly has been a part of this for a long time. And then just recently with our new album, we welcomed some more folks. Blair Masters. Blair's a great keyboard player.
So it's safe to say that the musicians came first.
Definitely. The musicians and the vocals. The artists also came first. We've had the vocalists that have been with us from day one. Dave Gibson. Dave was from Dave wrote Jukebox in My Mind for Alabama. We've had a gentleman by the name of Darrell Lee O'Donnell. Melissa Duvall has been with us. Gwen Sebastian. But one of my dearest friends, my first mentor of this group, Monty Lane Allen. And I don't know if you know Monty, but Monty is just an amazing person and a great songwriter, Christian songwriter. He spent most of his career with Alan Jackson. But Monty has been with me forever. In fact, our latest single that we released, Stars in the Line of the Night, co-wrote that with Monty, and Monty's doing the vocals on that. So everybody came along together. We're really organic. If you ask what kind of music we are, we're not a country group. We're not a rock group. We just kind of very generic, and we just kind of go across the spectrum. But, we just finished, as you meant, we went in the studio during CMA Fest and cut a new album. and we're excited about it. But it's all over. It's all across the board. I mean, we had Sam Levine join us on saxophone for 2 songs, Bobby Darin songs. We're doing Somewhere Beyond the Sea and I'm Beginning to See the Light. And those songs are 60 years old, and they still have that appeal. But, when you do these, you really want to make sure you're not trying to copy the cover song. You want to make it your own, which Chris on the arrangements did with that. But we brought a very talented vocal artist, and her name is Minnie Murphy. And Minnie came in and brought the jazz side to that equation. It was very, very cool. Then we also did Drift Away. We like to do songs that our players, our contributing folks can relate to. They have stories to tell. So we're doing Drift Away by Dobie Gray. And Chris, actually, that was his first gig back in the 70s with Dobie when he went and did the Merv Griffin show. So Chris was definitely into making sure that this is going to sound right. He came in, we started on a Monday. He came back in on Tuesday and Wednesday, didn't leave till like 9 o'clock at night on Wednesday till he got done with all his overdubs, which is a great story. But another great part of this story is Robert Bailey. And I don't know if you know Robert, but Robert's story, he does backgrounds for a lot of folks, including Garth. But Robert, he has a side story that he likes to tell. Remember the movie Animal House?
Oh yeah, yeah.
He was one of Otis Day's knights in the movie.
That's awesome.
And he came in to do, him and Vicki Hampton came in to do their background vocals. And while they were listening to the song, he was telling his story about this song Drift Away. He said, when I was a little kid, my mama would only let us listen to gospel music and country music in the house. That's all we could listen to until that song came out. She said, my mom made me go buy that 45, and we flat wore it out. And here he is 30, 40 years later singing on that song. Very, very cool. And, we did some other great things. We've got Ron Wallace, who's been with us from almost day one, who is just an amazing singer and performer. Him and Melissa came in and they did Meet Me in Montana, which is another #1 hit song that I don't think anybody's recorded since Marie and Dan Seals did it. And then Melissa also did Heaven, a Bryan Adams song. And then we did one of my favorites. I always have to get one thrown in that I want. And I had them do Circle by Harry Chapin. And, great song. And we had some great folks on that. So as you can see, we're just all across the board.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more, because you also did Bridge Over Troubled Water.
We did.
So what would make you choose a song like that?
Well, when we sat back to pick our songs for that album a couple of years ago, what I do is we do a couple of things. We ask the players and the singers, what songs would you like to do in this particular example? Went to Ron and said, Ron, if you had one song that you could do, what would it be? And he came up with Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And Bridge Over Troubled Water has always been a favorite of mine. And I knew we were stepping out to do it, because it's such a great song. But I had this idea, this vision to do it uniquely and different. And we went and had 3 of our female artists do it. I don't think it's ever been done before. A trio of women artists doing this song. And it's just amazing if you had a chance to listen to it. But we have Melissa Duvall, we have Gwen Sebastian, and Heather Beckett did that song. And as you listen to it, you can just imagine they're on stage and they're just coming together as that song comes together. And when we released it in Europe, it actually went to #1 in Europe.
Oh, wow.
So pretty cool.
That is very cool. They did a great job on the song. I mean, the whole song as a whole, it just has a different feel than the original. It feels like a more modern twist on it as well. So, I mean, I really like the way it came out.
Appreciate that. And it really is interesting because, Chris did the arrangement on it. And, he wanted to pay respects to the piano part in that song, which he did. But definitely, I mean, the vocals on that song are just amazing.
You mentioned Chris again, and just for note, he is the guitar player, and he's typically the session leader. Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah,
he really is, and he's just an amazing mind when it comes to sitting down and doing the arrangements on these songs. One thing I remember when we got done doing the first run of the song, Michael Spriggs. Everybody goes into the control room after the song. And Michael Spriggs was standing there listening to it. Michael played on Leon Grimes' version A Bridge Over Troubled Water. And when he got done listening, he goes, that's even better than what we did with Leanne. So, it's fun, but it's just seeing the artistic creativeness and the love that these folks have for each other. It comes out in the sound.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, it's amazing. And I mean, you mentioned Good Time Charlie earlier. I mean, that has just a different feel to it as well. It's got that violin in there, but it also has a B3 pad in the back there, and it just adds a whole different level of depth to it. So
really does.
I like the twist that you guys are putting on it. I like the work that Chris is doing, and of course the production that Bob does, and it just ties it all together.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, like I said, I'm kind of like the curator for this deal, and I do write some of the songs. But it was kind of interesting when we released the album back in December of 2021. When you go on your iTunes app and it'll show you all the listing of all their preferred recommended albums. We actually made it. Wow. We've had songs that we've released in Europe that we've had 3 number 1 songs off that album in Europe, which, country music in Europe is huge. They're just loving it. And we think the album has itself overall, it's had about 700,000 streams since we introduced it.
Oh, yeah. It's got hundreds of thousands of streams I've seen so far.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive. I mean, it's impressive for a group that has come together just for the fun of it. It's just a group of people that have gotten together to play music that they enjoy together. And it seems to be doing well. But you mentioned something in there I want to circle back to, because your part in this as well is you're a songwriter. And we've talked about a lot of cover tunes so far. But let's talk more about the originals. So how does the songwriting process work?
For me, I'll never use AI, so I'll just say that right now. The songwriting process for me is experiences in life, feelings you want to get out, but I also very rarely will I write by myself. One of the things that I stress to myself is to collaborate and co-write with folks, because, you can write a song and it's like this, but you collaborate and it goes off like this. And we've had a lot of great experiences. We have, I've co-written with Jan Buckingham. Jan is a very renowned, famous, one of the best songwriters that music world has ever known. And she's a part of our group. Written, of course, with Monty and Allen on life's experience. What you learn as you write that I've learned is that you leave your ego on the curb. Can't be afraid to hear somebody say no.
Right.
That type of thing. And, there's a lot of good songs out there, but I was always told you need to write the next great song. A songwriter that's just starting out may have the tendency to say, I want to tell you how I got inspired to write this song. I don't care what inspired you to write your song, because this song is going to have to relate to other people, where you have to be able to step out of your shoes and write something that you think is going to be more universal. But, we did have a couple experiences. We co-wrote a song off our first album, which was called Daddy's Margarita Rose. And that's a song that I co-wrote with Jimmy Mattingly and Chris Lusinger. But it was a song that when my wife's father passed away, she wasn't there. He passed away alone. So we wrote a song about his life. Trying to put somebody's life in 3 minutes is not the easiest thing to do. But we also wanted it to be a song that women and daughters who never got to say goodbye to their daddies during the pandemic could relate to. And that song just rips at your heart.
It does. It's a reflection really song for sure.
So we've done that, and more of the song. And we did another song where we had a friend who recently told me the story about when she married her college sweetheart just before the Vietnam War. They were in Iowa, and he got shipped off to Vietnam. And she had never been out of Iowa. But at that time, the military would send their troops for a retreat R&R while they were on tour. And he got sent to Maui. And she met him there. She was only 19 years old. And they had this great time. But she didn't realize, as we all do, when we experience things in life, we don't really stop to think sometimes how special that is until you get to the end of the line. So she was telling the story that she met him in Maui, and they had a great time. Came back. He came back 30 days later because his mom was not doing well. He had to run the family business. So that became their life. They got divorced and then got back together again, got remarried. And about 5 years ago, he passed away. She told me this story. So we sat down and we were reflecting on this, and we wrote the song called Stars in Lahaina Tonight. And if you get a chance to listen to it, it tells a story, but it tells a story about lost love and coming back to and regaining that love, even though that person in your life is gone. Those are the types of things that we write about. I mean, I learned very quickly not to try to be too cute. Just write from your heart. We have a dear friend who's part of the High Mountain Breezes. Her name is Conrad Reeder. And Connie actually is singing on a song called Songwriter's Heart, which I'd like to talk about in a minute, which is another one that I wrote with Heather Beckett. But Connie was John Denver's backup singer for 15 years. And John has always been an inspiration to me, one of my favorites. In fact, one day, I don't know how Connie and I connected, but we did. And one day we were going back and forth. And I asked her, I said, when was your first concert at Red Rocks in Colorado with John? And she goes, 1983, I think she said, or something like that. And I said, that was my first concert at Red Rocks with John Denver. So Connie was married to Roger Nichols.
Oh, yeah.
And Roger, found Steely Dan and worked with John.
Worked
and
with
anyways,
Bob.
Yeah, with Bob. And she sends me this picture of John on stage at Red Rocks that Roger had taken from backstage. So we took that picture. I put Connie's photo up in the upper left and my photo up in the upper right, and we titled it 39 Years Later. Who would have thought 39 years ago that two people who didn't know each other were in the same venue, were now collaborating on a song, a tribute to John. But anyway, the point I wanted to make was John would tell Connie, if you want to say something in a song, say it. If you're mad, let them know you're mad. And then he used to also say, if you see an opportunity, you better grab it or somebody else will. So I'm going back and forth with Connie on this song, trying to get her to do the background vocals. And we're going back and forth with him. And finally, I pick up the phone and I call her. I said, Connie, do you remember what John used to tell you? She goes, yeah. So well, that's why I'm calling. And the rest is history. The song is just an amazing song. Her and Daryl do a great job on it. But those are the kind of experiences that this whole process is all about. Songwriting is all about. I want to talk about the Songwriter's Heart if I can.
Sure.
It is probably my favorite song that I've written. And the reason being is I have a dear friend, Becky Hobbs. And as you know, Becky wrote Angels Among Us, among other songs. And I called her one day and I said, Becky, what if you had decided when you were young that you wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor and not a songwriter? And Angels Among Us would have never been written. Imagine the hundreds of millions of people who would never have experienced it, never been able to relate to that song. And I would tell her, I said, when I'm gone, nobody's going to remember who I am. But you're going to live forever in your words of your songs. So what I did was I wanted to take the songwriter's heart and make it a living entity. So when you listen to that song, that's exactly what we're doing. Heather and I made tributes to 9 different artists in that song. We always ask people, see if you can count them all. I'll give you a hint. The first one was John Denver, But that's probably one of the most inspiring songs I've ever had, idea for a song I've ever had.
Well, let's also touch on one more of these because I just think it's fascinating to hear the stories behind them. Let's talk about Holding Them Back, because I like the way it has the horn intro instead. So you mentioned earlier not taking any clear path. So this is one of those examples where we take an instrument that you wouldn't typically find in music like this, and we start the song off with it. So what inspired the horn intro?
Well, me being a little difficult with the guys. That song was one of the first songs I ever wrote, and I actually wrote it with Mark Mosley, who back in the days when we first started. We've done different versions of it. Monty Lane Allen. Remember one day I was talking to Monty. I said, Monty, can you fix this song for me? And so he actually sat down, and as any co-writer will do, they'll pull out their guitar and they'll start playing it and singing it. And he sends it to me, and I go, man, that's good. Wow. So let's run with this. So good friends with Chris Latham, So he goes over to Chris's place at the Gorilla Studio, and Chris works with Bob we collaborate on stuff all the time. And so they laid that song out, and we've got it as a demo and all that good stuff. And then I'm thinking, I always wanted to have a saxophone on a song. And we had to change it up a little bit. So I called Jermaine Mondine. Jermaine is a Hall of Fame saxophone player. He lives in Tulsa. I said, Jermaine, we sent him a song and see what you could do with this. And he did. And we changed the whole complexion of the song, because when you listen to the original song, they're in a field. Here we wanted to transition it more to a beach scene, more of a love scene. And the saxophone just brought that vibe out. We released that song on the album, and it too went to number 3 in Europe. But that's why I went with the saxophone. We wanted that was the first starting point for us to transition and add more non-traditional thing on the songs that we're getting ready to release. We mentioned the Bobby Darin songs. We've actually got saxophones on. We also are adding trumpet, brass. I'm going, wow, this is really, really cool.
Who did the arrangement on that song?
Chris.
So was it his idea then to start the song off with drums as well? Because that's one of the few songs where drums come in from the beginning.
Definitely. And what happens is once we've got the song done, okay, then we sit back and say, okay, now we want to add sax to this and on that type of stuff. But yeah, Chris definitely does all of the arrangements of how that comes in. And you're right, that's absolutely unique to have the drum start out on that song.
Chris is an amazing guitar player, amazing session leader, and obviously an amazing arranger. Right. So this team of people that you've arranged, it spreads wider than just the musicians. So I know we've mentioned Bob, but can you tell me a little bit more about the spread of people that are involved?
You bet. I mean, like we talked about on the player side, we're talking on the vocal side. We mentioned Melissa Duvall, Dave Gibson, Ron Wallace, a gal by the name of Amanda Ray. Amanda is a very talented artist. She lives in Nashville, and she joined us on a song that we had done previously called Slow Drift, and we put her on that, and it sounds very, very cool. Monty Lane Allen, of course, as mentioned, Minnie Murphy, and then we have Tanya, and Tanya just joined us, can't pronounce her last name, but she sings with Amy Grant. Singing with us also, the Conrad Reader. Our songwriters include Jan Buckingham, myself, Heather Beckett, Monty Lane Allen, Janie West. Janie is probably one of the best ARs that the music industry has ever seen and known during her time. Janie is a part of the group. Janie provides, one of the things we do besides our music is we provide mentoring services, whether it's songwriting, whether it's how to pitch your songs, which Janie does for us, or doing demos, whatever. So we're expanding the knowledge and the experience of all these players. Then we have an engineer by the name of Kyle Hirschman. And Kyle is probably the single most talented engineer in all of Nashville. This guy is not only good, but he is quick. And you'll laugh if you go to our Instagram page. I caught him on video while we were doing Beyond the Sea, or I don't know what song it was, but you could tell your engineer likes it when he's tapping his pencil while he's doing it. Very, very cool. But Kyle does our engineering work. We have a gentleman who handles our distribution, electronic distribution, and his name is Ed Gertler. And Ed is a seasoned veteran from Sony Music. One time before he retired, handled all of the country music for Sony distribution and sales. So we have such a wide variety. And of course, Dustin Soper is our marketing guy. He's the guy that comes up with most of our creative work. And he also keeps us grounded because, we're all been doing this such a long time. We know who our audience is, but at the same time, you don't want to sound outdated or whatever. Dustin kind of keeps us looking good, sounding good, and that type of thing. So and then we have some friends that join us. Deborah Allen is a longtime friend and mentor. She sang on Will the Circle Be Unbroken with us, along with Benita Hill. You might not know of her, but Benita was the one, Two Pina Coladas.
Oh, yeah.
And then I mentioned briefly in passing, Vicki Hampton and Robert Bailey. They do our background vocals for us. And so there's about 22, 23 of us, and it's growing. And I should mention, we also have Tim Crouch. Tim is a great fiddle player, and he's the one who's playing fiddle on Stars in Lahaina tonight. Catherine Marks, and you can't forget Catherine. And he's been with us from day one. So they all have their A game. They're all just tremendous all-star talents.
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing to me how you're assembling such a large team of people that all have a specific specialty and are able to contribute to a much bigger picture like this. But you just mentioned, will the circle be unbroken? And I wanted to just touch on that for a minute because you mentioned her singing on that, but that kind of has a choir feel to the back of it as well. Again, how did that come about?
It did. That was another one that I've always wanted to do, but we again wanted to do it very unique and different. And we wanted to get as many different vocals list on the song, and we did want it to be more of a gospel thing. We did not want to, try to match the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band's version of it. But what inspired me for that song was that, if you recall back in the day when they had that group sing, well, that was the kind of the basis for wanting to do this. And we wanted to do a song. I wanted to do a song that we would stick at the end of the album that would get everybody very inspired to want to listen to more. But I think it may have come out to be a more gospel version of it, simply because how the vocalist sang it. And basically, Ron Wallace sang the whole song first, and then everybody else came in and did their parts. And Deborah really put the gospel sound to it. I mean, she just rocked it, completely. And it was so funny too, because Melissa was getting ready to do her part, and then part of the songs that we learned, the old church songs, and she said, "What do I say?" Well, just say the old church songs that Mama taught us. That's how that one came about.
Can you talk a little bit more about Dustin's part in the marketing?
You bet. Dustin, talking about the marketing piece of this program, which is very important to us, because a lot of times you can do a project and then it just sits on the desk. It has to be marketed. But what Dustin does for us, Dustin actually he's a young guy who does a great job. He's got a great music background. He's in the hospitality business, but he's done a lot of work with folks like Reba, doing her website and stuff like that. So Dustin is my sounding board. The one thing I've learned when you do things, when you have somebody market something for you, you just dot I's and cross T's. You don't tell them what to do. You trust what they do, and the results speak for themselves. So he handles the website. He handles the design of our albums. He definitely gives us critiques and values, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing. And many times he said, "Bruce, you don't want to do that." Okay, that's fine. But Dustin also has his own network of folks. He introduced us to a guy about another component of ours, in Mark Nicolosi. And Mark is one of the leading videographers in the music world. And Mark actually, him and a gentleman by the name of Sherman Halsey, who was Jim Halsey's son, who passed away a few years ago, basically started music videos back in the early 80s. So we had Mark come in to our studio session and videotape it for us, because we're going to try to kick some ideas around what we can do to get the word out more about what we are and what we're not. And I asked Mark, I said, "Mark, you've done a lot of these. What's your take, on your day here?" He said, "Bruce, the vibe and the magic and the love and the respect is off the charts." He said, "I cannot believe that these folks are playing this music for the very first time."
Yeah.
And I remember we did, and they were doing things that were new and unique and different. We got done doing, I think it was Bobby Darin's Beyond the Sea. And Mark Beckett comes into the control room and he goes, "I have never done anything like that." And here's a guy who's played for everybody. He's played at the Grand Ole Opry. He was Olivia Newton-John's drummer. And you're going like, wow, this is really, really cool. Just a lot of family fun. And we say on our website, we are a family. We really are. We're a music family. And I think the thing about it is, and you and I have talked about this, is that we have to have respect, mutual respect for everybody and for what they do when they're not doing stuff in the high mountain breezes. We respect that. We have to be very, we're very cautious about what we do and what we don't do. Again, it's all about us. And I think what happened this past studio session was the light went on in everybody. Now we get it. Now I get what this is all about. I'm just honored and blessed to be a part of it, and bringing these people together. I would have never thought this was going to be the case. I know that when Deborah Allen and I first met, which was, about 10 years ago. I don't know how we did, but we did. And she told me, she said, Bruce, she said, I'll give you the greatest piece of advice that someone gave me when I first started. And she said, I had just signed my first record deal with Capitol Records in LA. And the president of Capitol Records told me, he said, I'm going to tell you right now, this is the greatest piece of advice you're ever going to get. And he said to her, you help people get what they want and reaching their goals, and you will get what you want. And absolutely right. Here we are today. I never thought 10 years ago you and I would be sitting here talking about this experience.
Right. Well, let's tie it together with one last piece of your puzzle.
You bet.
And that's Mr. Bob Bullock. What kind of trash can we talk about, Bob?
Oh boy, I can. Well, let's tell you. Bob can tell you. I mean, he has so many great stories. His days with Steely Dan and Mike Rich, and George Strait, Shania Twain. He is so down to earth that I wish I had some trash about him, but I don't. So just great stories and great experiences, and our music reflects it. And he'll always come back and say, well, this thing is not really done. I think we need to add this here and add that there. But he does tell some great stories about the folks that he's worked with in the past. There isn't anybody better at doing what he does when it comes to producing and engineering and seeing and hearing the sights. He loves his music. You go into his house, he's as humble as can be about his experiences.
Right. All right, sir. Well, we do this thing here we call Unsung Heroes, where we take a moment to shine the light on somebody who works behind the scenes or somebody who may have supported you along the way. Do you have anybody you'd like to shine a little light on?
Boy, there's so many of them. Deborah Allen, for sure, for certain. Becky Hobbs, Chris Lusinger, all of them behind the scenes have supported Jimmy Mattingly. These folks, Deborah especially, support me. They prop you up. They don't hand you anything. They encourage you, and they support you when you think you've about had it. So shine the light. I shine on all of them.
A big thanks to Bruce for taking the time to share his stories with us. And as always, thank you for taking the time to hang with me here. I really do appreciate it. If you know anyone that would enjoy hearing Bruce's story, please be sure to pass this episode along. You can do that and find the links to everything mentioned over at jfranzi.com/episode 81. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to The Jay Franzi Show. Make sure you visit us at jfranzi.com. Follow, connect, and say hello. This episode has been brought to you by VR Knives, your source for 100% custom knives made by a true rock star. So, if you're in the market for a new piece of art, reach out to VR Knives. 407-421-5528. 407-421-5528.